You're listening to the Ordinary Vegan Podcast, where we teach you everything you need to know about adopting a plant-based diet full or part-time. Our goal is to empower you to live a long and healthy life. You can find today's show at ordinaryvegan.net or on iTunes. If you have any questions, please send an email to questions@ordinaryvegan.net.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Ordinary Vegan Podcast, number 22, titled, What Everyone Needs to Know About Intermittent Fasting. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Nancy Montori, and I advocate a whole food, plant-based diet for health and wellness. A whole food, plant-based diet consists of delicious foods like fruits and vegetables, grains, legumes like beans and lentils, and healthy fats like nuts, seeds, and avocado. It excludes all meat, dairy, and eggs. I have a desire to serve others and help others become as healthy as possible. So welcome to my podcast today. Before I introduce today's guest, I wanted to thoroughly explain why I'm doing a podcast on intermittent fasting. I have never fasted in my life before my experiment last month, but now I am learning from some of the most trusted plant-based doctors that the health benefits of fasting go way beyond weight loss. As many of you know by now, I am all about science, and scientific studies are now showing that intermittent fasting is a useful tool for all kinds of health problems, like type 2 diabetes. It can help protect you from cancer. It can reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. It can improve your memory and help with Alzheimer's disease. And new research led by the University of Southern California this year concludes that a diet mimicking the effects of fasting could be potential treatment for autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis. There are many ways to practice intermittent fasting, and it is more about calorie reduction than depriving yourself of food. For example, there is a 16-hour intermittent fast 5 days a month where you eat your last meal at 6 p.m. and eat your next meal at 10 a.m., creating a 16-hour fast. Or some people have 800 to 1,000 calorie days a month. We will get more into the different ways you can practice intermittent fasting with today's esteemed guest. But the point I'm trying to make is that this program is not about depriving yourself of food, and it is not really a diet. And I don't recommend this to anyone who has had challenging weight control behaviors or anyone whose BMI is under 18.5, or if you're pregnant or breastfeeding or under the age of 18. And it's always advisable to check with your doctor before starting a new food regimen like intermittent fasting. Also, you will need supervision to fast if you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes or have high uric acid, or if you're taking prescription medications. With all that said, what I am saying is some studies are now showing that intermittent fasting can carry huge benefits if it is done right. So let's learn how to do it right from today's guest, Dr. Joel Kahn. In March 2017, I attended the Holistic Holiday at Sea and listened to many lectures by Dr. Kahn. But the one that really caught my ear was his lecture on intermittent fasting. It wasn't the first time on the cruise I was hearing about intermittent fasting, and I was very curious about why something that has been practiced throughout all of human history was suddenly the talk of the plant-based medical field. I came back from that cruise and did lots of research on intermittent fasting and decided I needed an expert to join me in exploring this new meal program. So, Dr. Kahn graciously agreed to come on the Ordinary Vegan Podcast and share his experience and expertise in intermittent fasting. Dr. Kahn is one of the world's top cardiologists and believes that plant-based nutrition is the most powerful source of preventative medicine on the planet. He is also the best-selling author of many books, including Dead Execs Don't Get Bonuses and The Whole Heart Solution, and he just released a steamy new book this month called Vegan Sex, Vegans Do It Better. He is the founder of the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity and even has a plant-based cafe called Green Space in Ferndale, Michigan. Dr. Kahn knows what he's talking about, and his message is compelling. So please welcome cardiologist Dr. Joel Kahn. Hello, Dr. Kahn, and thank you so much for joining the Ordinary Vegan podcast today.
Thank you for having me. Are you kidding? I'm excited. You have such a great message you share with people.
Well, we are very excited to have you here. And in my introduction, I explained that your lecture on the holistic holiday at sea is what got me interested in the subject of intermittent fasting. And what interested me the most was that I dislike any restrictive diets that calorie count. And this intermittent fasting appeared to me like a new, healthy approach to eating. And I have so many questions. So let's begin. The first thing I wanted to ask you, Dr. Kahn, is why you personally got interested in plant-based nutrition, and when did you become a vegan cardiologist?
Yes, I got very interested in plant-based nutrition out of duress. I grew up keeping what are called the dietary kosher laws, and I walked into the dormitory first day undergraduate studies in Ann Arbor, Michigan, 1977 fall, so 40 years ago, and I said, "Salad bar, you're my friend," and I continued that pattern for a few years, and then I read John Robbins' Diet for a New America on a Vacation, a brand new book that was just out that a friend loaned me, and kind of started to understand the ethical, the environmental, and some of the preliminary medical aspects, ethical, environmental, and now medical. And then I began practicing cardiology, to answer your question, in 1990, 27 years ago or so. And 3 weeks after I started a very aggressive practice of catheterization lab, heart attack treatment, balloons and stents, Dr. Dean Ornish published the Lifestyle Heart Trial. And I read it the day it came out, July 21, 1990. And I said, holy moly, I'm doing this with balloons and stents, and Dr. Ornish is doing this with, salads and bean casseroles and oatmeal. And I really adopted teaching heart patients what I was already doing at that point for about 13 years. So I'm 58, so 40 of the 58 years have been free of hamburgers and pepperoni and pizzas and all the rest. Pizzas loaded with cheese. I have plenty of super healthy pizzas now.
Congratulations. And wow, Dr. Ornish has changed a lot of people's lives, hasn't he?
And continues to, absolutely. He's had nearly 40 years himself of contributing amazing science to the literature, and he's not done yet. So we're very a huge amount of indebtedness.
Now I wanted to talk to you about today's podcast subject. And that subject is called What Everyone Needs to Know About Intermittent Fasting. My first question is, can you explain what intermittent fasting is?
Yes, and it is truly a fascinating topic. So intermittent fasting is one form of fasting. And even the definition of fasting can be debated. Some people would say fasting is a period clearly going without eating. Some would say that's 0 calories, intake of water, herbal tea is okay. Other than religious reasons, most people that fast for medical reasons will stay hydrated with at least water. So 0 calories might be a fast. There's a very popular form of fasting that originated in a book in England talking about 500 calories a day as a fast, enough to, that's about 75, 80% less than the average person eats in a day, so it's a greatly reduced amount of calories. It could even include whole food at 500 calories. But, we're talking a severe or complete reduction in calories for a period of time. So that will be debated. That's what we'll talk about. There's a zillion patterns one could follow, and let's talk about why one might want to follow. But some people will simply try and achieve 12 hours a day that they're not eating. 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. is a very popular form with the idea there may be some health benefits. Some people will try and go 24 hours plus without eating for health benefits. We'll talk about a pattern that's recently become scientifically fascinating, where there's 5 days of reduced calorie fasting and the health benefits of that. So, and then repeating the cycle. That's why it's intermittent. You're not just doing it once. That'd be a one-day fast. But we're talking about having a plan or a pattern of repeated calorie reduction. That's a term, calorie reduction, or DR, dietary reduction, to achieve some health benefit. And why would a vegan ever want to do that? These are all fascinating topics.
Well, what got you interested in the subject? I mean, how did this all happen for you?
I've been, if you read the medical literature, so of course there's a couple holidays that I have fasted for, and, that religious and, maybe there's some way a medical aspect to that. And I honor all those people that just finished Ramadan and that full month of daytime fasting, and the challenge that is this time of year when Ramadan falls in the summer. Where I live in Detroit, where we have the largest Arabic population in the United States. So many of my friends, peers as physicians and patients just finished Ramadan. Very challenging. But I have been following the medical literature. I have an interest in cardiology, in identifying and reversing heart disease. I hate to use the term anti-aging because it sounds so new age and it might be a skin cream, but the idea that we have increasing medical knowledge to talk about the ability to extend life extension. My cardiology clinic is called the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity. I'm very focused on trying to identify and reverse the process that kills more people than any other, which is hardening the arteries, atherosclerosis. So I read the literature. I read scientists. There's a fascinating Englishman named Aubrey de Grey with a PhD and the longest beard in science. And his lectures are fascinating. But as of today, there's no direct practical implication of what he talks about. There will be. He's got a foundation and he has donors and he has amazing research going on. But the other scientists that I would read regularly would be Dr. Valter Longo, Walter with a V, Valter Longo, PhD, Italian-born scientist who's been at University of Southern California in Los Angeles for 20 plus years. I've been reading his papers, occasionally a YouTube podcast that he's interviewed on. Another fascinating individual making breakthrough research. But again, until recently, there wasn't a practical implication. There's, futurists out there like Ray Kurzweil. Some people may recognize his name and his contribution. He's head of health for Google, a pretty important role, Google Health and all. So, these things are out there that people can read about, kind of the futurist view of longevity. How long can we live? How can we enjoy our most optimal health? And out of that has come some, clinical applications today, not 5 or 10 years from now, that even the healthiest plant-based eater might want to know about. And I certainly did want to be one of those.
During your lecture, you mentioned stem cell repair and regeneration because of a fast-mimicking diet, I think you were referring to at the time. But can you tell us how intermittent fasting can affect our stem cells and why we should care about stem cells?
Yeah, and we'll take this right to the human arena. All of life, even a healthy life, one rich in sleep, rich in whole food, plant-based, nutrition, rich in fitness and such, is a balance between damage and repair. Even breathing oxygen exposes our body to some stress and damage, and that's why we make antioxidants and eat antioxidants. It's just the nature of life. And there also is a concept in medicine and physiology that most people haven't heard called hormesis, Hormesis, which really goes along with the phrase that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, that a little stress, even as little as eating bitter foods, bitter melon, arugula, bitter taste, why do those foods tend to help lower your blood sugar and lead to improved artery health? Because again, something that doesn't kill you makes you stronger if it's a bit of a stress on the system, bitter foods. So stem cells are youthful early cells in our bone marrow that can differentiate or develop into a bone cell, into a kidney cell, into a cartilage cell and such, maybe into a heart cell. We've always said the heart can't really rejuvenate itself. And there is a very active field of science of using embryos or placentas or umbilical cords and such, and harvesting, very immature stem cells and using them to try and treat some of the most frustrating medical conditions like Parkinson's disease and Lou Gehrig, ALS and such. And it's a developing area. You can right now go down outside of the United States and pay a significant amount of money, several tens of thousands of dollars, and be in a clinic supervised by a medical doctor that might use stem cells for your heart disease, for your orthopedic problem, trying to avoid surgery, maybe for brain disease. In the United States, it's mainly in research protocols, so you might find a university and all that's interesting, but still it's in progress. It's not exactly mainstream to be getting stem cells as part of any standard therapy in the United States. But it turns out our body has them. And why don't we take advantage of the fact they're in our body? So I'm only aware of one piece of data, and you use the word fasting-mimicking diet, or FMD, which is actually a patented and trademarked term from the University of Southern California, which is one of those types of intermittent fasting. It's the brainchild and the many, many years' work of researcher Dr. Valter Longo for his research on anti-aging and longevity and cell metabolism, and increasingly the focus he has on fasting and fasting-mimicking diets. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Medicine last year at age 48. Pretty decent accomplishment, and won, it's called the Jubilee Award, which is for, I believe, coming in second. At least they don't ignore the person coming in second. They get an award, quite a substantial honor and award. So the data is that following a 5-day program, and we can go into it in a little more detail in a minute, you can boost your stem cells to appear in your blood, circulate through your blood. They like to find injured areas of the body. I'll give you a personal anecdote. I have done a cycle of fasting-mimicking diet now 4 months in a row, and I had a very uncomfortable plantar fasciitis. And either it's coincidence or it's causal, and I can't tell, but nothing I was doing was taking my plantar fasciitis away, which was interrupting some running and other things I'd like to do. And bada boom, bada bing, it is gone. And it kind of went away overnight one day after the third cycle. And I find that pretty amazing. And I have also had anecdotes from patients about shoulder pain, back pain, and other such findings. So that's really, really wild stuff. I mean, when we talk about fasting, some people think, great, I can fit into a swimsuit or a tuxedo or a evening gown for an upcoming vacation or wedding, because fasting may help a person control their weight. But if we can actually manipulate our metabolism and our reparative functions, we're talking about one of the most exciting. I actually think fasting mimicking diets is the single most exciting scientific breakthrough of 2017. We're only halfway through the year. And if it were a pill or an infusion, not just an eating plan, it would, be promoted heavily by pharmaceuticals and probably be $15,000 a year. We can talk about what it actually is, but it's just food, but it's intelligently selected and created food program that's a plant-based miracle in my mind.
Well, I tried that. I experimented with that. And I absolutely loved how I felt during and after. And as a matter of fact, I went to my doctor following the fast. And for the first time in over 30 years, my blood pressure was 120/70, which I don't ever remember that. I have a history of high blood pressure. But one thing I do want to mention about the fast mimicking diet, it is really more about under-eating than fasting. And I think that's what's, confusing to everybody because it's called fasting, but you're not really fasting. It's like you said, you're choosing the correct foods so you get enough nutrients in the day, which is why I chose that program, because I wanted to be certain that I got enough nutrients. So can you explain how that program works exactly? And also, why does intermittent fasting affect our stem cells? Why?
Right. So specifically, Dr. Longo worked and experimented with different programs of fasting in animal models. And then when he perfected it, he actually was in the kitchen creating tasty tidbits for animals, and very kind of him, and then saw what happened to their physiology and health. And then he introduced that proven model into a human model and did studies and all. And what he found was, in fact, he was involved in a sense with this launch of this English-based movement in fasting called the Fast Diet. And a pretty well-known physician now, Dr. Michael Mosley, who has proposed that 2 days a week, a person looking to possibly repair their body, possibly lose weight, possibly improve their blood pressure, like you mentioned, blood sugar, maybe heal themselves of some aches and pains, 2 days a week, drop their diet to 500 to 600 calories a day. And that was in some discussion with Dr. Longo 5-6 years ago, before the current project Dr. Longo has completed and launched as a offshoot of the University of Southern California. So that exists out there, but there's no data for something like stem cell production. What Dr. Longo ultimately refined was, if you do a series of days in a row, and that's why it is now a 5-day program, you get particularly interesting responses on the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th day that may extend into even the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th day when you start to refeed and add back a healthy diet that you've been following. Hopefully not a hamburger and french fry diet. It's kind of counterproductive. And on that 3rd, 4th, 5th day, if blood studies are done, you can actually document a rise in stem cells in the blood. You can document that an important hormone that as an adult may contribute to cancer risk starts going down. That's called insulin-like growth factor 1. And it may take several days in a row. So he calls it a fasting mimicking diet because you're not doing 0 calories. You're not even doing 500 calories. It's a 5-day program with a preset food, I'll call it a menu, that's 1,100 calories the first day, kind of get you into the mood and not make you feel too hungry, and then 800 calories for the next 4 days. But because of the calorie profile, the actual ingredients, the spices, the makeup of how much carbs, proteins, and fat, you actually get the same response out of your body in terms of both weight loss, blood sugar, blood pressure, that you might get if you dropped your calories even further, but you might not be able to work and function as effectively at 0 or 500 calories as you're likely to do. I don't know about your experience. My experience 4 months now is I can see all my patients, do all my activities. I don't usually do much of a workout. I might do a little yoga, flow, and stretch because I do that most days anyways. And there are some people that need to be careful with this whole concept, people with brittle diabetes and blood pressure issues and underweight people, and you don't want to have an eating disorder and do this. It's not an answer to that. That's, got to be addressed by the psychology of the eating disorder first. But for the majority of people, because the truth of the matter is, most of your listeners are either probably partially or completely plant-based. There's a lot of chubby vegans. Even eating healthy, there's a lot of chubby vegans. I've adopted the approach that a plant-based whole food diet, low or no added oils, is by far the best choice for the prevention or reversal of most of the chronic diseases we talk about as physicians. But there may be a way to goose that even to a higher level, taking your supplements, your vitamin D, your vitamin B12, using infrared sauna as a way to hack your health to a higher level in weight control, blood pressure control. But I think adding in this intermittent fasting program called fasting-mimicking diet can add to the health of a hardcore whole food plant-based eater, if their goal might be helping to lose weight to that optimal level, or even just for its rejuvenating, regenerative effect that has been documented in the medical literature, even if their weight is pretty close to optimal. So I have personally, I will say it, I've lost 18 pounds in 4 months, as easy as it could be, because for the other 40 years of my plant-based life, I've stayed the same weight. It's the first time it's gone down, and It's staying down. It's staying down. I got on the scale this morning. I'm still 17 to 18 pounds down, and I haven't done my fasting mimicking diet cycle now. It'll be, I'm going to wait till after the holiday weekend and our upcoming weeks and do it pretty soon. But anyways, and many of my patients are reporting the same thing, and the medical literature reports the same thing. So it's a very exciting addition. By the reason I latched on to Dr. Longo and reading his literature is I kept hearing him making the comment that a plant-based diet may indeed be the optimal diet for longevity. And, I'm always scrambling for little morsels of science and support for what I have pretty much tagged my entire medical career on. And then he launches this fasting mimicking diet that is a plant-based diet, and I was quite excited about that it didn't have beef jerky or butter or eggs or cheese in it. And it's quite a comment for the constant tension we have with the paleo movement, with some leading physicians in this country telling my patients, add back. My patients turn on public television, they watch a very prominent doctor at the Cleveland Clinic tell them to add back animal-based fats in their diet, and they do it, and their cholesterol's 100 points higher when I see them back. I'm tired of that, but it happens all the time. And it's so refreshing to see Dr. Longo, and indeed perhaps the world's leading expert in longevity, say, no, that's not actually the science of longevity. The science of longevity is getting animal protein out of your diet. So I love the whole program.
Yes, I experienced even though I didn't need to lose weight, I did experience the weight loss in a 4 pounds in 5 days.
Yeah,
and
nice.
I didn't, it didn't make me feel bad. It made me feel really good, honestly. But that wasn't even my goal. But it's pretty amazing. But you mentioned something called infrared sauna, and I have no idea what that is. And I have a feeling some people out there don't either. So could you explain what that is?
It's fair enough. We'll take a little rabbit trail diversion, come back to fasting. But I have formal university training in integrative medicine, and it's the science of using all modalities that have science to approach it. So in Japan, if you read the cardiology literature, which is in English, and you look how you should treat a patient with advanced heart disease, one of the first line therapies in their guidelines, we have our guidelines in the American, College of Cardiology, they have their guidelines in the Japanese College of Cardiology, they consider a type of sauna called infrared sauna. So it's a dry sauna, not a wet sauna, but it's not going to have that box of coals in the corner, kind of like an Arizona sauna. It has panels in the wall that emit infrared energy, not EMF. It's not an electromagnetic frequency, potentially damaging energy. It's infrared energy. And it's usually about 130, 140 degrees. And you can buy one for your home. It's a pretty nice gift to give yourself. You might find a health center, a wellness center that hasn't, but there is quite good data in the Japanese literature that it can be quite restorative and healing for blood pressure, for congestive heart failure, for what we call coronary artery disease, weight control. These are published. This isn't new age. This is actually cardiology medical data that's not very well known, but I have been using it in my patients. I have one in my home. It's a real treat. It's very, you can put on a little music. You can, do a little meditation or yoga or read or whatever you like. So it's another way to quote, I like this term, not everybody does, quote, hack your health, using tools to achieve even a higher level of energy and healing and health. And I think really there's more data right now about intermittent fasting, and particularly the Dr. Valter Longo fasting-mimicking diet in terms of profound effect on our health and weight loss. But, combining the two is awesome also.
Okay. Sorry to divert you like that, but I didn't want to leave my listeners hanging about what the heck is an infrared sauna. I've heard the results of intermittent fasting can be astounding on other diseases. So can we go over some of the other health benefits of fasting and begin with why does intermittent fasting maximize your potential age?
Right. So in animal data, and we're talking to a human crowd here, but in animal data, there's almost not a species studied from yeast, which we can't relate much to our connection to yeast, but nonetheless they're a good model, to small animals like mice, to larger animals like apes. I'm not for doing research on apes and all, but it has been done. And if you reduce the amount of calories that a research animal eats compared to its mate that eats a normal amount of chow, you will see extended lifespan by as much as 30%. So a mouse that might live 2 years will live, almost 3 years if you restrict the amount of calories or try a fasting protocol. And this has been seen over and over and over. Why might that be? And, we're getting clues in the human arena from this series of publications from Dr. Valter Longo, in that if you can lower hormones that promote cancer through fasting and these multiple day fasts, and the program is basically 5 days you eat a certain set menu, and then 25 days you eat healthy, and then you do it the next month and do it the next month. It's only inconveniencing your going out and such. I think it's enhancing, not inconveniencing, but it's only 5 days a month. But if we're lowering cancer promoting hormones, if we're raising stem cell production, if we're lowering blood sugar, even just losing body weight lowers cancer risk. We're profoundly altering that balance of health and disease. So at this point, you have to be cautious. You can't claim more than's been shown, but losing weight in a sustained manner, lowering blood sugar, which means an avenue to prevent adult diabetes that is often associated with obesity. Lowering blood pressure is documented, and hypertension is actually worldwide number one killer in the entire world, millions and millions and millions of people. Lowering cholesterol, which I still believe, I'm old-fashioned, lowers your risk for cardiovascular disease. There is data, some published, some not, that this 5-day fasting modified diet program promotes improved brain cognition, executive function. So there is a program in development that is the fasting-mimicking diet for Alzheimer's. There's a program for fasting-mimicking diet for multiple sclerosis based on a clinical trial that will be published soon. And then really interesting, there's actually, if anybody wants to go to the website, I can lead them to it. There's a product that should be released soon. It's a 4-day fasting-mimicking diet program from Dr. Longo for people getting chemotherapy for cancer, because the data is in a trial that's published that side effects may be reduced, but even maybe more profoundly, that it protects healthy non-cancerous cells from damage from chemotherapy and potentially allows, a more direct hit on the cancer cells themselves. So it's actually a program for chemo-related assisted support using nutrition.
Wow. And there wouldn't be a downside, correct? I mean, certainly.
The program, Dr. Longo has carefully crafted the calories, and there are nuts in the program. And I've asked, what does the nut allergic patient do? And there really isn't a scientific answer, because there isn't a kit available that has no nuts, and there isn't any real experience to go with altering the diet. If you want the same results, you use the exact same formulation that was used. And the other is there's a few olives, and people aren't allergic to olives, but I do find when I talk to people that I didn't realize how many people have very strong feelings pro and con on olives. They're whole olives. They're not olive oil. I'm not a fan of olive oil, but I love olives too, and all the rest. So, but yeah, there's really no downside, except, I mean, if somebody's underweight, if somebody, I'm talking really thin, or as I say, food addictive disorders, or unstable diabetics, they probably shouldn't do it, and they should discuss with their physician the monitoring of their blood sugar and such.
Yeah, it's really funny how, when you're on that program, the fasting mimicking diet program, how you look forward to 8 olives. I mean, they taste absolutely
Well, it's true. And, if you've done it, that breakfast nut bar, which is so delicious. I've had many my patients ask me if they could buy a box of the stuff, and they haven't done it yet. But if I drop a little piece, I feel a little bit like a mouse. I'm looking forward to picking it up.
I know the feeling. So a big question here. Can you achieve the same results from intermittent fasting while eating meat and dairy?
Yeah, you can. I mean, for the person looking for more information on Dr. Longo's program, there's a website, maybe you put in the show notes, that's a subsidiary from the University of Southern California called Prolon, Prolon, like prolong longevity, prolonfmd.com, prolonfmd.com. All you need to know is there. There's videos, there's information, there's ways to identify how to obtain the kit to eat exactly the food that's been prescribed for this result. But for the rest of the world that may not, rush to do that, closing your mouth from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. is a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. There is a natural, even if you don't use the exact recipe mix Dr. Longo came up with, there's a natural repair and healing when you allow your body to have some time without working on assimilating and digesting food and incorporating and absorbing and all. And if you can shut that, that process down for 12 hours, as opposed to many people are snacking at 11 p.m. and they're up at 5 in the morning and eating breakfast or a smoothie at 6 a.m., they've shortened that time down, to a relatively small number of hours. It's a very good program to try and follow. It's the simplest by far, just 12 hours. Now, when you talk to real serious scientists in the field of longevity, most are eating 2 meals a day. Most do not feel that the human body needs 3 meals a day. Maybe that was constructed by the Kellogg's company and the Post company to make sure we had a bowl of breakfast cereal. Of course, that then morphed to Frosted Flakes and Fruit Loops and other, fairly at least in today's society of obesity, we all kind of eat that as kids and seem to have survived, but it's a different era of abundant calories that we live in now. But 2 meals a day on average, and I've adopted that. That may be why I maintain most of my weight loss after 4 months, is a mindfulness that you can survive on less. It may be beneficial on less, and you don't have to follow it 365 days a year, but it's a good thing. So yeah, those are a couple clues there. The concept that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Actually, the world's leading longevity experts in general disregard that.
Wow. And one of the other doctors on the Holisticology at Sea mentioned a diet, a fasting diet, an intermittent fasting diet that was 5 days a month for 800 calories. And not in a row, but just choosing 5 days a month and cutting down to 800 calories. What do you think of that?
Any proposal, and I think there's a gold standard now, and the gold standard is, the 20 plus years of Dr. Longo's research, because the publications are on the website I gave the URL for. I mean, this is serious science in the best medical journals, scientific journals. So we've got a gold standard, and just like in general, plant-based nutrition, we can say without a doubt, we have the data for reversal of cardiovascular disease, number one killer. We have data for reversing adult diabetes in Dr. Neil Barnard's data. We have substantial data for preventing and reversing autoimmune disorder. And when people are talking about following the paleo diet or the Atkins diet or the South Beach diet, the gold standard is plant-based nutrition. I think in the world of fasting right now, since February 2017, with really impressive human data that has gotten a lot of attention, does a program like you mentioned. If the sole goal is weight loss, there's a lot of different paths, and that may work. That's kind of what I was doing for the past 4 or 5 years, not knowing that there was a special sauce to doing it several days in a row. But if it's being proposed, but there's no data or the data isn't as impressive, as you know and I know, it's actually kind of nice to concentrate it into those 5 days and get that kind of, a special response that your body will do only if you stack days in a row.
Yeah, and another thing that came up was that after your food is digested, your body goes into sort of a post-absorptive state that lasts between 8 and 12 hours. So if you eat dinner at 6 p.m., like you were mentioning earlier, and not eat again until noon, those 18 hours would be like an intermittent fast. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And there's, perfectly fine program for anybody to adopt that. Reduced number of hours a day when you're eating to allow more hours a day of repair or restorative function. And, most likely lose some weight with it. I will point out, I'm still playing around with this. I've been lecturing and advocating, 5 or more servings of fruits and vegetables a day for the public, which is, a modest goal, but one rarely achieved, and not necessarily only the plant-based world. But we did have some science earlier in 2017 that as many as 10 servings a day of fruits and vegetables may be optimal for disease prevention, survival. Very large study. I think it was 2 million people participated, and it was like a dose response curve, 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, 8 to 10 servings of fruit and vegetables a day. Now, if we reduce our meals 25 days a month, or leave the fasting-mimicking diet days aside, and we eat 2 meals a day, now it gets really challenging to try and get 6, 7, 8, 9 servings fruits and vegetables a day into 2 meals. I mean, you really have to construct large salads, and I am a fan of using blenders like smoothies and vitamin NutriBullets inside. For smoothies, I mean, you can easily do that if one of those 2 meals has a smoothie packed with 5, 6, 7 servings. I've actually made for TV on Detroit a smoothie with 10 servings of fruit and vegetables just to prove you could do it in one single fell swoop. But it does take some clear-cut planning if you want to both reduce the number of meals and still strive to achieve, a large number of servings of fruits and vegetables.
So, why should anyone out there listening today try intermittent fasting?
75% of at least Americans and probably many Western countries are either overweight or obese by definition. That's one reason. Millions, tens of millions of Americans are dealing with hypertension. You shared your blood pressure response. My blood pressure fell close to 20 points with 4 months of a fasting mimicking diet. It's a natural solution. It's it's fairly important that people know that that's available. Most of the options out there, we know that diets, crash diets, even hospital-based diets have a very, very poor outcome if you look a year or 2 later. Bariatric surgery itself, although appropriate certainly in some circumstances, has ways that people figure out how to eat around it and regain their weight. So, there's a tremendous need for, the medical aspects of fasting, which is weight reduction, medical biomarker and blood pressure and such reduction. And then there is this issue that there's a growing awareness that, there's so much out there going on in the scientific world and arena. And as I say, I've been reading for 5 or 10 years pretty heavily in the field of anti-aging. And the standard statement kind of is, just don't screw up your body for the next 10 years because there's going to be so much new to take you to the next level of health and longevity that do it decade by decade. But I think right now the thing to grab onto, our fasting mimicking diets for the next decade. And let's see what comes next. Let's see what the next generation of biomarkers and biohacking and personal health monitoring and stem cell development and all these things are, if you have an interest to try and have, a reasonably long lifespan without chronic diseases, to be able to, a friend and peer, Dr. Russell Jaffe, an expert on longevity, says, I just want to be dancing at 120 and I want to be dancing with you. I want to have some friends around that are both old and lively and have the faculties and the joints to enjoy life. We don't know what that's going to be like because there aren't too many people that are there, but there's very few people focused on longevity that don't believe that, reaching a lifespan of 100 plus in very good shape isn't around the corner pretty routinely.
So who shouldn't be fasting?
Yeah. And again, you will typically lose weight. So we don't want, we often say a BMI, a body mass index. You can go and, search a little calculator online and put in your height and weight. Body mass index of 18 or less. That's thin. And, you don't want to lose weight beyond that, whether that's your natural body weight, whether there's an eating disorder reason that you're that thin or a chronic medical condition. So if you have both a blood pressure problem, but you're very thin, this really isn't the solution for you because you'll lose more weight and could be risky. The person with diabetes in general, and certainly the medical term brittle diabetic, certainly the type 1 diabetic, reducing calories to 800 a day is going to completely change their insulin needs. And this is, not a program for them, for sure. I mean, the obvious food allergies as designed in this program with Dr. Longo, which is the emphasis on nuts. There are a couple different kind of nuts, or both macadamia and almonds in this program. So there are some people with specific nut allergies, and that would knock them out for sure. Those would be the first ones I'd start with. That would take people out of the arena.
How about people who currently take medication or supplements?
Yeah. During the 5 days in the program patented by Dr. Longo last year, there are, as you know, a couple supplements included, and you would want to, take those, and you would, probably want to check with your provider, health provider, or if you pick the supplements yourself and they're not crucial, probably would stop yours and use theirs. If you're on supplements, because I'm a physician that will often prescribe supplements to a patient, you might want to talk to the provider and see which you can cut back. Right now, increasing number of physicians know about this program, but far from, the majority. It'd be a great gift of anybody listening to share with their doctor the science, because this is profoundly advanced science, but they may not know about it yet, even though it has gotten a fair amount of press. Medication is, a real important issue, and that's if you're on blood pressure. You need to monitor your situation with, by monitoring blood pressure, blood sugar, if you're a patient who has significant problems. And although I can tell you from my own clinical experience, people have done real well. A few have had to cut back on their blood pressure medicine. I mean, that's actually a great goal that they're achieving, blood pressure control with less medication. That should really always be the goal, but it has to be monitored. People could get dizzy. People can lower their blood sugar.
I've read that working out in a fasting state is beneficial to your body to burn through fat reserves. Do you agree with that? And what are the effects of fasting on exercise?
Right. So during this specific fasting program, we spent most of the time on this relatively new and exciting information about 5-day fasting programs. I would not recommend to people that they're going to the gym and working out. I would not recommend that people are really trying to achieve that same. In fact, it may actually counteract some of the reparative, regenerative, restorative effects, because you, during many workouts, are actually to some degree injuring your body. And injure, repair is a common kind of sequence from a gym workout. It works out well in the long run, but we're all about repair during these 5 days. So again, a very light and peaceful kind of yoga flow and such, little meditation, all might be a reasonable choice. If somebody's just working out, it is true that if you're just following your normal diet, hopefully your normal plant-based diet, working out in the morning as opposed to evening, or working out on an empty stomach as opposed to post-meal, is of some advantage, and it's what I usually recommend my patients. But I also recommend to them, I'm not talking about any fasting diets now, that don't use any excuses. If lunchtime is when you can get that vigorous 20-minute walk in, or if even the evening is when you can get to the gym, get it in, do something. Doesn't have to be an hour, but figure out what works in your schedule, and don't skip exercise as a pretty regular health benefit plan.
Well, I think we covered everything, but is there anything I missed? Is there anything you think the ordinary vegan community should know about intermittent fasting before we close?
I just say, and you touched on this, and I'll amplify it, that and this is personal experience, there is a psychology and a mindfulness that I think results from following this program. And it's, particularly if you repeat it a few months in a row, it's recommended that you do 3 months in a row to match the clinical published data. And actually the pricing of the whole program through University of Southern California is more favorable if you do it 3 months in a row. So there's quite an interesting mindfulness about being able to deal with the plethora of calories, even in the vegan world. I mean, you walk through an airport nowadays, you can find a whole lot more vegan options. Restaurants have many more. I own a restaurant in Detroit that's 100% vegan, Green Space Cafe. I mean, our movement is really growing and developing, and we are going to face chubby vegans left and right. And it's not a fat shaming comment. It's just being overweight is a medical risk for diabetes and other issues. There is a mindfulness that comes out of doing this that leads, in many people's experience, to more self-control, more what the Okinawans or Eastern philosophies call harabachibu, eating to your 80% full, which is part of the Blue Zone's experience of mindful eating without gorging. I've actually written on the web, I hope you're not offended by this, my own little word is #vegasm. You're walking through an airport, there's a roll-up that says, it's a vegan tofu barbecue Korean something or other, and you get so excited, you don't really need to eat right then. You're not hungry, you just ate before. But you buy it and you eat it because you want to support the movement. I mean, when you've lost weight, when you feel good, when your belly's trimmer, and that same experience occurs, there's a mindfulness. And all of us, not all of us, but many of us could actually use that little boost in self-control. And I think many people will benefit from it. So I talk about vegan plus, let's get our whole food plant-based diet down. Let's help the environment, let's help the animals. Let's, increase the potential that we'll avoid chronic disease or be able to reverse it. But I think we'll be able to take that even a step further with some of the things we talked about.
Great advice, Dr. Kahn. And
thank you.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about is your most recent and life-saving book called The Whole Heart Solution, Halt Heart Disease Now with the Best Alternative and Traditional Medicine. Can you tell us what that book is about and what you tried to accomplish with it?
Well, thank you for bringing it up, The Whole Heart Solution. It's actually my first book, and I've now just published my fourth book. But The Whole Heart Solution is kind of my first hardcore book. It became a national public television show that's playing across the United States right now. You might turn on the TV one afternoon or evening and see me talking about plant-based nutrition, how to prevent heart disease. But it was the result of my going back to university and spending a year studying both plant-based nutrition and integrative medicine. That's where the knowledge about infrared sauna, early heart detection, inflammation came from. It's a very useful, practical book. It doesn't have recipes. I'll publish a book at the end of 2017 called The Plant-Based Solution. That's an entirely vegan book with many, many recipes my wife did the hard work on. But the Whole Heart Solution would be a great life plan to optimize your heart health, which really is to say to optimize your body health. Actually, if you don't mind, my most recent book published a week ago, and it has the very exciting title I thought you were going for, called Vegan Sex: How to Dump Your Pills and Jump in Bed. And that's on Amazon with a very provocative cover if you want to go take a look at that.
I can't wait to buy it.
Yeah, that was not available at the Holistic Cruise, but next year maybe they'll put it in a brown paper wrapper, but it'll hopefully be on the cruise.
Okay, you got me curious. I can't wait to look at it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Kahn, and thank you for generously sharing all your knowledge about intermittent fasting. We really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you on the next Holistic Holiday at Sea.
Yeah, no problem. I absolutely love the work you're doing, and I really do applaud it. And I really totally excited to be able to be on your show. So thank you so much.
Yep, just like you, we just want everyone to be healthy and happy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kahn. That's it for today's podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I will put links in this week's show notes on everything Dr. Kahn and I've referenced. You can learn more about Dr. Joel Kahn's books and heart-healthy programs at drjoelkahn.com. If you have any questions or feedback at all, send me an email at nancy@ordinaryvegan.net. And please join our healthy, vibrant community on Facebook at facebook.com/ordinaryvegan. We are over 310,000 strong, and our community loves to help and support each other. As always, thank you for your support and generous reviews in iTunes. I really appreciate it. And the more reviews we get, the more prominently it gets featured in iTunes. So thanks for helping out. Also, we have so many exciting podcasts coming up. So make sure you subscribe on iTunes so you don't miss a thing. Till next time.
Thanks for joining our plant-based community today. Together, we can accomplish great things. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of Ordinary Vegan's recipes and plant-based tips. If you have any questions or feedback, email us at questions@ordinaryvegan.net. Until next time.